You're scrolling through social media, a friend casually mentions, we only use 10% of our brains. You nod, perhaps even share the tidbit later, feeling a little wiser. It's one of those persistent urban legends, a scientific zombie that just won't die, even in our information-rich age. But what if this widely accepted fact is nothing more than a captivating myth? What if the truth is far more complex, more fascinating, and frankly, a lot less limiting than a mere 10%? Prepare to have your understanding of the human mind challenged as we dive deep into the origins of this pervasive myth. Explore what neuroscience truly tells us about brain activity and uncover why believing in the 10% myth might actually be holding us back from unlocking our full potential. Get ready to rethink everything you thought you knew about the powerhouse between your ears. The myth's murky origins. Where did this idea come from? The 10% brain myth is a prime example of how a simple, appealing idea can embed itself deeply into popular culture, often without a shred of scientific evidence. Tracing its exact origin is like chasing a whisper through history, but several theories and figures frequently surface. One popular, albeit often misattributed source points to early 20th century psychologist and philosopher William James. It's said he once remarked that humans are making use of only a small part of our possible mental and physical resources. While James certainly advocated for tapping into greater potential, he never quantified it as a precise 10%. His message was one of untapped human capacity, which, over time, might have been distorted and boiled down into this more digestible yet inaccurate percentage. Another likely contributor is Dale Carnegie, author of the hugely influential self-help book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. In its foreword, writer Lowell Thomas incorrectly attributed to James a statement that the average person develops only 10% of his latent mental ability. This direct, albeit mistaken, attribution in a book read by millions undoubtedly cemented the idea in the public consciousness. The myth also found fertile ground in the burgeoning self-improvement movements of the 20th century. The idea that vast, dormant reserves of brain power lay waiting to be unlocked was incredibly empowering. It suggested that if only we could access that other 90%, we could achieve superhuman feats, possess telekinesis, or become a genius overnight. This alluring promise made the myth particularly sticky, even appearing in advertisements for self-help programs and later in Hollywood blockbusters like Limitless and Lucy, further solidifying its place in our collective imagination. However, despite its pervasive presence, the scientific community has consistently debunked the 10% myth. Modern neuroscience, armed with sophisticated imaging techniques and decades of research, offers a far more intricate and dynamic picture of how our brains actually function. A full house, not an empty room. What neuroscience really shows. If we truly only used 10% of our brains, the other 90% would essentially be dead weight. Evolution, being a highly efficient and economical process, would have long ago pruned away any unnecessary tissue. The human brain, weighing about 3 pounds, consumes 20% of the body's oxygen and calories, despite making up only 2% of our body weight. This enormous energy expenditure for a mere 10% utilization just doesn't add up from an evolutionary perspective. If 90% was truly unused, there would be significant evolutionary pressure to shed it, or for it to be repurposed. The fact that it persists and is so vital is strong evidence against the myth. Modern brain imaging techniques, such as functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, and positron emission tomography, PET, scans provide compelling evidence that we use virtually all of our brain. These technologies allow scientists to observe brain activity in real time. When a person performs even the simplest tasks, like speaking, walking, eating, or listening, these scans show activity across multiple brain regions. Even while resting or sleeping, the brain remains highly active, managing vital functions like breathing, heart rate, and memory consolidation. Think of the brain not as a collection of individual, isolated switches, but as a vast, interconnected network. Different areas specialize in different functions. The occipital lobe for vision, the temporal lobe for hearing and memory, the frontal lobe for planning and decision-making, and so on. However, these areas rarely work in isolation. A complex task, like reading this sentence, involves visual processing, language comprehension, memory retrieval, and even emotional responses, all engaging multiple brain regions simultaneously. Furthermore, brain damage offers another powerful argument against the 10% myth. If 90% of the brain were truly redundant, then damage to large portions of it should have minimal effect. Yet even minor brain injuries, such as those caused by stroke or trauma, can have devastating and widespread consequences, affecting speech, movement, memory, or personality, depending on the area affected. Neurosurgeons often face immense challenges when removing tumors, knowing that even small excisions can lead to significant functional deficits. This sensitivity to even minor damage strongly contradicts the idea of vast, unused reserves. The reality is that at any given moment, depending on the task at hand, a large percentage of your brain is active. Not all neurons are firing at once, of course, as that would lead to a seizure. But over the course of a day, and indeed over the course of your life, almost every part of your brain will be utilized. It's a dynamic organ, constantly adapting and rerouting neural pathways, a phenomenon known as neuroplasticity, which allows us to learn, heal, and develop new skills throughout our lives. Why the myth persists, the allure of untapped potential. Despite overwhelming scientific evidence, the 10% myth continues to captivate. Why? Part of its enduring appeal lies in its inherent optimism and the promise it holds. The idea that we have untapped potential, that we could be smarter, more creative, or more capable if only we could unlock that other 90%, is incredibly motivating. It offers a convenient explanation for why we might not be achieving our goals, suggesting that the fault lies not in our effort or circumstances, but in an untapped neurological reservoir. It's also a simple, digestible concept, easily communicated and understood, unlike the complex realities of neuroscience. In a world saturated with information, often the simplest, most dramatic narratives gain the most traction, even if they lack scientific rigor. The myth feeds into a desire for quick fixes and extraordinary transformations, rather than the hard work and continuous effort that true self-improvement demands. Moreover, the myth is often conflated with the genuine concept of cognitive reserve, which refers to the brain's ability to cope with damage or disease by using alternative brain networks or by processing information more efficiently. This concept suggests that individuals with higher cognitive reserve might be more resilient to age-related decline or neurological conditions, but it doesn't imply that parts of the brain are simply sitting idle. It's about optimizing the use of all brain regions, not activating dormant ones. The real superpower. Embracing neuroplasticity and lifelong learning, dispelling the 10% myth, isn't about crushing hope. It's about redirecting it towards a more accurate and ultimately more empowering understanding of our brains. Instead of yearning for a mythical 90% to suddenly come online, we should focus on the incredible reality of what our brains can do and what they are already doing.